What is a narration? Everyone knows. And so it seemed that we could certainly begin to deal with it in the relative certainty of a demarcation of the field of investigation sufficiently precise, at least to avoid misunderstanding about the object of our observations and reflections. We all constantly have to deal with narrations, with someone telling us something, sometimes interesting, at times just not. It's part of our daily lives, and certainly has many forms and places of manifestation. We are all producers of narrations, more or less short, more or less long. We all felt the desire to speak with someone, to say something to someone else. We all felt the satisfaction to have succeeded, or the frustration for not having succeeded. Many of us know that there are people who have made the narration an object of sophisticated studies, not to say scientific studies. Linguists, semiologists, narratologists, masters of the art of narrating. We will follow a path, in good part different and divergent from this illustrious tradition, while welcoming the effort and the cognitive result, and simultaneously stating that these results have helped us very little, not to say anything, in improving not only our skills as storytellers, but also our understanding and knowledge of the substance which consists of any narration. Let's start with the tautology, consistent with our systemic premises. The narration, in whatever form and manifestation, is action and, therefore, necessarily useful to survival. This affirmation is certainly strong, but we have no escape. Any narration, by definition, is useful. Now, the not easy task that awaits us is to be able to accord this statement, any narration is useful, with the common belief and the common interpretation that can exist useful narrations and that there are also unnecessary narrations. The evidence about the existence of unnecessary narrations, or at least so far valued as such, should be available to each of us. We found ourselves, and I think any of us continue to be, in situations where someone tells us something of totally useless compared to whatever parameter we can identify, at least regarding our position in that situation. Totally useless for us. He or she repeats something already said, expresses a commonplace, focuses on a detail irrelevant to us, wanders in speech. The list, although not infinite, is long. Our feedback is certainly truthful, and yet is not necessarily sufficient proof to deny the truth of our statement. Any narration is useful. While the narration can be useless under the practical aspect for us, this doesn't deplete the issue, and certainly, so far, we don't put into play any new element related, for instance, to the matter of which the narration is constituted. Again, almost by definition, at a time when we acknowledge that narration is action, we must also acknowledge that such action is carried out by a human subject, and that in first place the utility feature must be sought from the standpoint of the subject that narrates, and not from the point of observation, from the standpoint of those who, in a certain sense, undergoes the narration. Again, I think that none of us lack the experience of suffered narration, of which, despite the best and most intense efforts, we found impossible to trace any clue, if not proof, of usefulness to the narration subject. The wisest among us in these cases frequently fall back on the partial inscrutability of the human soul, on the factual impossibility of fully accessing the mind of another, of knowing what is spinning in his head. Some scholars that of the bizarre and the incomprehensibility have made matter of their work, try to forward along paths that seem to promise, if not to allow, to find the sense of what at first appears as a nonsense, maintaining a position in which, while accepting on the one hand the evident nonsense as nonsense, the obvious futility of the narration, on the other hand, do not renounce the possibility of constructing with the first narrator narration in which the initial nonsense is turned into a sense, identifying the usefulness initially untraceable. Sometimes they succeed, at least to what I understand, sometimes not. Psychoanalysts, psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, but also anthropologists, anthroposophers, and philosophers of various schools and orientations. Not that the privilege is reserved to them, even to us it's happened to pass along those paths, looking for meaning and usefulness of a comment, of an observation, of a narration that has presented itself as nonsense, sometimes discovering that it made sense and was useful, sometimes not. A passenger on a bus every 5 seconds pronounces 18, 18, 18. After a while, another passenger, intrigued by this repeated 18, approaches him and asks him, "How come you keeps repeating 18?" Getting the answer, another who doesn't do his own business, 19, 19, 19. We place ourselves as honest researchers, not as wizards. Not even we can overcome the obstacle that we encounter more or less frequently, constituted by not being able to know with certainty what passes through the mind of another. But we can enlarge a little the understanding of how and why each narration is useful, with this plausibly increasing our chances, if we wanted to take those paths, to turn nonsense, uselessness, in sense, utility. We need to equip ourselves with a few more elements about the matter of which any narration is made, putting for the moment in the background the question of usefulness. We acknowledge that human narration presents numerous and different forms and manifestations. Can we find a common root? Attempting a phylogenetic reconstruction, I think difficult and unlikely, a starting point other than the ability to produce noises sounds, abilities that the ancestors of our species have acquired in the course of the evolution of biological life.